Yo, what's happening guys? Welcome to your second JavaScript tips and tricks tutorial, and in this video we're going to go ahead and create an animated countdown using JavaScript and CSS animation. Okay then dude, so here's a quick example of what we're going to be making in this tutorial, and as you can see we've got days, hours, minutes and seconds counting down to some kind of mega event. And all this is controlled via JavaScript, this actual countdown, and that flipping you see going on there, that is a CSS animation. It's going to flip any card when it goes down one, as you'll see with the minutes round about now. Boom, there we go. So that's what we're going to be working towards, and I am also going to be uploading all of this code to my GitHub page, which I'll leave a link to down below, so you can go ahead and download that as well if you want and peruse through the code at your own leisure or extend it, whatever you want to do. But before you dive into any code whatsoever, there's probably a few things you should know before you do the tutorial, and that is HTML and CSS. Now you can probably get away with not knowing much HTML, it's going to be minimal in this tutorial, but CSS is going to be used to style up the timer and also that animation that you saw. JavaScript you also need to know, because most of the functionality of this timer is going to be controlled via JavaScript. So I've got playlists on all three of these things on this channel right here. I'll leave the link to those down below in the description, so if you want to go and check those out first of all, you can do, and then come back here. Alright then guys, so I'm here in Atom, that's the text editor I'm using. It's absolutely free. If you want to download Atom as well, I'll leave a link to the website you can get that from. And I've gone ahead and created three files, countdown.html, countdown.js and style.css. So first of all, this HTML, this is dead simple. All we're doing is linking up to that style sheet right up here in the head. Then in the body we've got this div with an ID of del countdown. That is purely for stylistic reasons. We're going to use that in the CSS to style this bad boy. And then we've got a div with an ID of clock right here. Now this is where we're going to inject the actual clock, the actual timer, using JavaScript. Okay, so that one's important. Then down here we've just got the units, which are the days, hours, minutes and seconds right here. And this is just a link to the countdown script, which we're going to go into in a minute. So all of this is dead simple, and like I say, you can get all this code from the GitHub page in the description down below. So this countdown.js and this style.css is empty at the minute, but we're going to work through these. And what I'm going to do, instead of typing everything out by hand now and then making loads of spelling mistakes and boring you guys, I'm just going to copy from this dude right here where I've got all these different chunks of code, and I'm just going to walk you through each one as I do it. So to begin with, let's paste this window.load function over here, and basically what I'm saying is when the window loads, fire this function. Then in this function we're going to declare a variable called deadline, set that equal to a new date which is currently in the past. We don't want that. Let's change it to the 25th of April 2016 at 5:15. Then after that I'm calling this function right here, start timer, which isn't defined yet, and we're passing in two parameters, clock and deadline. Now this deadline is just this variable, this new date object we created, and this clock right here refers to this ID here, so the ID of this element where we're going to inject the timer. Okay, so let's go ahead and add in this function start timer. So I'm just going to copy that and paste it in over here, and it takes these two parameters, ID, which is clock, and deadline, which is that date object right there. Then the first thing I do right here is create a variable timer interval, and I set that equal to set interval, right? And then that is going to fire a function right here every 1000 milliseconds. Okay, so every second we're going to fire this function. And inside this function, the first thing we're doing is grabbing this element, this clock element right here, document.getElementById, by ID, and the ID is there, which is passed through clock. So it's going to go out, grab this element, yeah, and store a reference to it right there in that variable. Then we're going to use that later on to inject some inner HTML and put the timer in that variable. Not that variable, that element on the web page. Alright, so the next thing we do is create another variable, and we set that equal to update timer, and we pass in the deadline to that function. So again, we've not declared that function, so let me grab that dude and paste it right up here. And this basically just updates the time, okay? So update timer does what it says on the tin. It passes through the deadline, which is here, this date object, right? And then the first thing we do within this function is set a variable time equal to that deadline minus new date. And this new date is going to be created every time we call this function, so every second, right? And what it's going to do is give you the date and time of the instance this function was called. So what we're doing is setting time equal to the deadline, the point that we're counting down to, which is around about here, and we're minusing this new date, which is the time at which this function was called. So it's going to get the difference between those two dates in milliseconds, and it's going to store it in that time variable. So then what we're going to do is we're going to return an object from this function to this variable right here, and this object is going to work out the days, hours, minutes, seconds, and total time left based on this difference, right? So it's just different properties here, and the days is worked out by saying math.floor. And remember, .floor just takes a number and floors it. So if your number is 4.8, it floors it to 4. If it's 4.2, it floors it to 4. Okay? Never rounds up, always rounds down. So we're taking the time right here, which is all those milliseconds. Then we're dividing it by 1,000, then by 60. This 1,000 converts it into seconds. Then this 60 converts it into minutes, this converts it into hours, and then this converts it into days, right? Because there's 24 hours in a day. So now we're getting that, we're flooring it, and that's our days left. We do a similar thing for hours. We say math.floor, we take the time, divide it by 1,000 first of all, that gets us the seconds, then by 60, that gets us the minutes, then by 60 again, that gets us the hours, right? And this time we're saying modulus 24. Now, what does this mean? Well, imagine this right here returns back to us 100 hours, yeah? We don't want to say on the hours card 100, like 7 days, 100 hours, 60 minutes, and 27 seconds. We want to say how many hours are left in this particular day, don't we? So to get that, we use the modulus, and we say 24 because there's 24 hours in a day. So if this was 100 right here, we had 100 hours left. Modulus 24, what that does is say, well, okay, how many times does 24 go into 100? It goes into it 4 times, right? And that equals 96. And then the remainder, how many hours left we have after that, is 4. So we have 4 full days, because 24 goes into 100 4 times to equal 96. That's 4 full days, and then we've got 4 hours remaining. So that modulus 24 gets us those 4 hours. Okay? So then the number of hours is equal to whatever this is, modulus of that. We do something similar for minutes. Time over 1,000 to get the seconds, over 60 to get the minutes, then this time modulus 60 to get the minutes. And same for the seconds, time over 1,000, modulus 60 to get the seconds. The total is just the total number of milliseconds difference between these two right here. Cool, so we're returning this object right here where we've worked out all the new times, every second this is called, and we're passing it back into this variable right here. So now all of these properties are stored on this variable, and we can output those properties to the HTML using this reference right here. So let me just grab this HTML, this JavaScript rather, and paste it in right there. And what I'm saying is clock, which is this reference, dot inner HTML. So we're adding some HTML to this thing right here, this div with an ID of clock. And then we're setting that equal to a series of span tags which we're concatenating next to each other, and in between those we're saying first of all the days, timer.days, which is here, timer.hours, timer.minutes, and timer.seconds. So now it's being output every second because we're calling this set interval thing is going every second, yeah? It's calling this thing every second, so every second we work out the new times, we pass it back to this thing right here. Then every second we're setting the inner HTML to the clock and we're outputting the new time. So this is updating now every second. And if I save this, then you're going to see a load of numbers hopefully appear here that are counting down. Now, right now, it just looks like one long number. That's because we've not styled it up. Okay, but we'll do that later. But that is kind of the backbones of our clock. Now, there's just a couple more things I want to do in this JavaScript. The first thing I want to do is recognize when we reach the deadline itself, when there's no more counting down to do. So how do we do that? Well, we just do a simple if statement, and I'm going to do that right here, like so, and that's gone way off. So let's bring it back in. Okay, that looks roughly right. It will do anyway. So right here, I'm saying we'll check for the end of the timer. And I'm saying if the timer.total, which is this thing right here, the total difference between that, if that is less than 1, then it means there's no time left, right? it means we're essentially at the deadline. Then what I'm going to do, if that's true, is clear the interval here, this thing. Right, so no longer is this going to cycle round. And then what I'm going to do is set the inner HTML of the clock element to equal this. Now, you could set it equal to anything you want. You could set it equal to something like the countdown has finished, whatever you want. I've just set it equal to 0, 0, 0, 0, just to show that the countdown no longer occurs. Alright, so that's checking for the end of the timer. One more thing I want to do is kind of help our CSS out when we come to do the animations by adding a class dynamically to whatever span tag is going to change. So if you think about it, this span tag is going to change every second. So we want to animate that span every second. We want to flip it over every second. This one is going to animate every minute, so we want to add a class to animate that every minute, this every hour, and this every day. So I'm going to use JavaScript just to add that class dynamically so that we can use CS animations on that class. So let me grab some code right here and paste it in over here. Okay, let's see where we are. Okay, so let's just bring this back in a little bit. Okay, cool. So what I'm doing first of all is creating a variable called spans, and I'm setting that equal to clock, which is this thing, remember, dot get elements by tag name span. So that's going to grab all of these right here because these are being injected into the clock, right? Now we need 4 animations going on. This every second, this every minute, this every hour, and this every day. So first of all, I'm going to call a function called animate clock, which we've not defined yet. And I'm going to pass in spans.3, not .3, spans, and then the third element within that. Because this is an array of all of these span tags, we want position 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, because we're going to animate this every second. So remember, this interval goes every second, and every second we're calling this function animate clock, and we're passing in this span right at the bottom. Okay, so it's going to animate that for us, or add a class for us to that span every second. Now this one is the minutes, and we're saying we want to animate the minutes only, if you think about it, when the seconds reaches 59, because when the seconds reaches 59, we're onto a new minute, because it goes 3, 2, 1, 0, then 59, and we go to a new minute, right? So when that happens, we want to animate the clock again, but this time pass in this span right here, okay, the minute one. Same for the hours. This time we need the minutes to be 59 and the seconds to be 59, because that's the cusp of when we get a new hour. So when that occurs, then we pass through to animate clock spans 1, which is the hours. And then finally, for the days, we're saying we want the hours to equal 23, the minutes 59, and the seconds 59, because again, this is like the last point of the day, yeah? So when we're about to get a new day, then we want to animate the clock, and this time pass through spans 0, which is the first span right here. So let's add this animate clock function, and it is dead simple. Just going to pop it right here. And it takes in a span. So remember, we're passing in a different span tag every time, right? So it takes that span, then it says span.className equal to turn. So we're giving it a class called turn. And then we're going to use that class in CSS animations to add in those animating features, all right? So it does that, first of all, then it does a set timeout, and it calls this function after 700 milliseconds, which is 0.7 seconds. And it removes that class name. It takes off this turn and just sets it equal to nothing again, right? So every time we call this, we're applying a class name of turn to whichever span element we pass through, only for 0.7 seconds before we take it away again. So the animation is going to occur for 0.7 seconds, okay? So let's save this now. And what we're going to do is just inspect this element right here. Let me make this bigger. And if we go into the clock, then you can see right here, we're getting a class of turn every second applied to that span. All right, let me just zoom in. So there's the class of turn, and when it gets to 0, 59, then the minute got the span with a class of turn as well, okay? So as we get to a different number on each span element, they get that class. So we're going to use that class right now to style up that animation. And we're just going to also style up the page itself. I just want to make the page a little bit bigger while we do this so I can see more of it. I'll get rid of that console as well. Okay, so let's go into the style.css, and again I'm just going to kind of copy and paste little segments at a time. So the first three little things I want to do is this. We've applied a background to the body and a font family of Tahoma. Next, this H1 right here, we've said we want a colour of white, and align the text centrally, large font size and letter spacing of 10 pixels in between each letter like that. The del-countdown, which is this kind of container element, I've said that I want that to have a width of 850 pixels and a margin of 15% top and bottom, so it comes down a little bit, and left and right auto, so it's in the middle. Cool, so let's grab the next thing, and this time I'm styling up the spans within the clock. So each one of these is in a span, remember. If we go down to this, you can see each kind of time, the days, the hours, minutes and seconds, they've all got their own span tags. So we're targeting those span tags right now, and if I save it, you're going to see those appear on the screen. Much more legible now. You can clearly kind of see the distinction between these numbers. This is days, hours, minutes and seconds. Looks a lot better. Dead simple styles there as well. Okay, the next thing I want to do is style each one of these span tags a little bit differently, and I'm going to use nth child to do that. So if you take a look at this, the first one, I've said I want to have a background of this colour, and if we save it, you're going to see these on the screen, so it's kind of like a pinky red. Then the second one, a background of this colour, third one this, and fourth one this. So that, now they've all got different background colours. Pretty cool. Alright, so after that, I'm just going to grab these two rules as well. And the first one right here is a clear fix rule. And I'm just saying after the clock, or rather after the content within the clock, so within here, yeah, when we get to the end of the content in here, I want to insert some content. That's what this says. And the content is just going to be blank rather. It's going to display as block, and it's going to clear both. This is just a clear fix technique, and I'm doing that because I floated all of these numbers to the left. So when I do that, the parent element normally collapses. And to get rid of that parent collapse, what I've done is use this clear fix technique. Alright, so the span tags within the units right here, I've styled up as well because each one of these is in a span tag, days, hours, minutes and second. So let's save that. Oops. Save this one rather. Okay, so now you can see these styles right here. Just looks a little nicer, nothing fancy going on there. And then after that we need to do the animation. That's the only thing left. So what I want to do is turn this thing when it's applied a class of turn. The first thing I want to do is make my keyframe. So I'm going to say, give ourselves a little bit of space here, at keyframes. And by the way, I've got a whole playlist on CSS animations. I'll leave the link to that down below so you can check that out if you're unsure of how to do this. Then I'll say turn. That's the name of this animation. And then at 0% at the start, I'm going to say transform. And I'm going to say rotate x 0. So what we're doing is we're going to rotate this element along the x-axis. And the x-axis goes across like this. So imagine this is one of those roasting pigs and the pole is going through it like that. As we rotate it, it's going to kind of flip this thing around, right? That's what we're going to do. So at the start, we're saying rotate it 0 degrees. And then when we get to 100%, we're going to do the same thing, transform. And it's going to be rotate x. And this time, it's going to be 360 degrees. So we're going a full circle all the way around. Okay, so let's now put the curly braces instead of those things and save it. And then all we need to do is apply this animation to the class which is added to these every second for the seconds, every minute for this, and that was the turn class. So we'll say span.turn. All we need to say is animate, or animation rather, and then we're going to apply the turn animation. It's going to take 0.7 seconds. It's going to ease, and we're going to say forwards. Okay, so now we get that animation every second on there, and if we wait just a second to see this one as it reaches 59 on the right, you can see this one goes down as well. Pretty cool. So there we go, guys. That is how to make a timer using JavaScript and CSS animations. Like I say, I'm going to upload all of this code to the GitHub page so you can go and grab it yourself, take a look through it. If you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to leave those down below. Otherwise, guys, don't forget to share, subscribe, and like, and I'm going to see you in the next tutorial.